There is no abstract art, Pablo Picasso. In 1932, Carl Gustav Jung published an essay analyzing Pablo Picasso's art as a psychologist rather than a critic. Picasso's cubism art style and his misogyny is a significant example of debate or diplomacy because his work inflicted art debates related to the separation of the artist from the art through the analysis of artwork and the psychological application behind it, in turn reflecting the way artists are viewed socially and mentally through their work.
Pablo Picasso was born October 25, 1881 in Malaga, Spain. His father was a professor in art and drawing and taught Pablo all he knew so he could pursue a career in art. Around the age of 13, Picasso quit art school to experiment with his own style of art with hopes to obtain a career on his own terms. Later in 1901, when Picasso was still experimenting with different styles, Picasso heard news of his friend, Carlos Casagemayas, committing suicide by shooting a bullet in the right temple of his head. Devastated by this news, Picasso had a sudden surge of depression, sparking the invention of his first artistic period, the Blue Period.
The Blue Period, which lasted from 1901 to 1904, consisted of blue monochromatic paintings that reflect a sorrowful feeling. With Picasso's depression, some of the recurring themes in his paintings included blindness, emancipated people, paintings with the aura of feeling alone, social outsiders, and the occasional nudity of females. Although he drew nude women in the Blue Period, his fascination with women really expanded afterwards.
Exiting his Blue Period, Picasso met Bohemian artist Fernanda Olivia while in Paris in 1904. She became his mistress and his muse while creating bright romantic paintings using various shades of pinks and oranges, in turn receiving its name, the Rose Period. The Rose Period lasted only from 1905 to 1906. However, only lasting a year, the Rose Period influenced the rest of his work up until the 1930s, showing prevalence to his mental disorders and abusive tendencies towards women.
Picasso was known for having multiple mistresses at a time, not caring about any of their feelings, raping women, and being obsessive towards them. Pablo was so obsessive that an Artspace article states, all his work could be categorized into 7 distinct styles, each one a document of his relationship with the 7 women in his life. Fernanda Olivia, Eva Goul, Alma Kokleba, Marie-Therese Walter, Dora Maar, François Guillot, and Jacqueline Roque.
Not only would he obsess over these women, he would also physically abuse them. Within the same article, Pablo Picasso's granddaughter even agrees with these allegations and says, he submitted them to his annual sexuality, tamed them, bewitched them, ingested them, and crushed them onto his canvas. After he spent many nights extracting their essence, once they were bled dry, he would dispose of them. In addition to women in his life calling out his behavior, women today are protesting against his misogyny. In an article from ArtNet News Art World, Roxane Gay responds to Picasso's work stating, we can no longer worship at the altar of creative genius while ignoring the price all too often paid for that genius. In truth, we should have learned this lesson long ago, but we have a culture fascination with creative and powerful men who are also merciful or volatile, with men who behave badly.
Another article that was published during Picasso's lifetime comes from a woman's perspective, the Omaha Bee. This article, which is better described as a fashion blog, explains that Picasso sets a certain beauty standard that is difficult to achieve. The blog also mocks Picasso's work by comparing their faces to Cubist paintings, trying to obtain a triangular smile. Pablo Picasso's inspiration was women, and it was very clear he romanticized them during this romantic year. Yet, he started objectifying them when creating Cubism. Cubism is an art style that is formed by abstract shapes and lines that create a muse representing direct feelings of music, abstract ideas, and commonly resembles architecture.
From a 1947 article titled Art the Great Debate, Jamie Sabartez, Picasso's secretary, comments on Pablo's work stating, Picasso took on as aim the fantastic wager of destroying the phantom of official beauty and substituting his own personal concept of beauty. He pursues and discovers beauty even in objects regarded as ugly, just as light sometimes lends sordid things effects on gorgeous color. She details Picasso's work as ugly, but in an ingenious way. This subtle, contradicting comment describes Picasso's work as unique and appealing to the eye.
Critics at the time believed that Picasso was a brilliant artist. However, his actions in art symbolized something greater in himself that caused critics to debate the separation of art and artist. Novelist and poet Jay Perini sets his case as follows in the New York Times. Can one really separate the art from the man or woman who creates that art? The answer is yes, definitely. There are many examples in history, too many, of great artists who were terribly flawed human beings, behaving very badly and hurting those around them. If If anything, audiences easily make this distinction. Nobody looks at Picasso's paintings in a museum and says, I should not take this work seriously because Picasso cheated on his many wives and was abusive to his son.
Even after the rose period of his era of cubism, Picasso still outwardly mistreated women. Around 1920, Picasso entered a new artistic period named neoclassicalism, which lasted roughly till 1930. Neoclassicalism introduced a form of art different from what Pablo had been creating. During this period, Picasso was inspired by classical Greek and Roman art and mythology and expressed this new interest with sculpting. His sculptures mainly showcase women, but he also created a few sculptures of simple day-to-day objects.
These sculptures, however, brought forth a new controversy of whether Pablo was in a mentally stable place. One specific article by Carl Gustav Jung writes as a psychological analysis about Picasso's art. Jung is a psychiatrist and only states his observations on clinical research. Within this analysis, Jung dives deep into Picasso's mental state and how it affects his art. While talking about Picasso's art, Jung states,
among patients, two groups may be distinguished, the neurotics and the schizophrenics. The first group produces pictures of synthetic character with a persuasive and unified feeling. The second group, on the other hand, produces pictures which immediately reveal their alienation from feeling. At any rate, they communicate no unified, harmonious feeling tone, but rather contradictory feelings or even complete lack of feeling. The picture leaves one cold or disturbs one by its paradoxical, unfeeling, and grotesque concern for the beholder. This is the group to which Picasso belongs.
At this point, Carl is depicting Pablo Picasso's works and detects signs of schizophrenic aspects. Mark Harris, a supporting author, explains Picasso's use of disturbed and fantastic imagery indicated that such imagery was arising from his subconscious. A current article from Psych Central states in an interview with Joanne Bagshaw, LCPC, a therapist in Gaithersburg, Maryland, states, Bagshaw blames gender role conditioning. Even though boys and men are absolutely capable of expressing rejection, shame, and other vulnerable emotions, they're generally not taught how to actually express them. She called this combination of entitlement and emotional skill to inflict a potentially dangerous mix that at very least will make their romantic partnerships difficult, and for some, increase the risk of perpetuating violence.
This new controversy brought up by Carl Jung and Joanne Bagshaw created a whole different aspect to Picasso's debate. It introduced a medical and factual critique rather than a biased liking or disliking towards Pablo's artwork. This style of unnerving, illogical pieces of art stays present throughout the rest of Picasso's career. This new style, formed by a mental nadir for Picasso, especially grows in this next artistic period, focusing on a style called surrealism. During this period, Picasso starts to paint heavy war trauma and gore-related surrealist paintings due to World War I tensions in Spain and France.
Even though Picasso is misogynistic, his new interpretation of art was significant because it caused others to interpret art in their own way. Pablo Picasso made people feel like they do not have to conform to one style or do it one way. His works influenced others to create how they want to create without having to feel judged. These are painters who transform the sun to a yellow spot, but there are others who, with the help of their art and their intelligence, transform a yellow spot into the sun.
Looking at this quote from Pablo Picasso, he obviously wanted to make an impact in the art world for his generation and for his posterity. His goals were accomplished since even now people are influenced by his willingness to be different and unique. Glancing past Picasso's judgment, some people today find him inspiring and look up to him and his accomplishments.
There can be no doubt that there was and still is a massive debate with Picasso's works. Multiple articles, manuscripts, medical analysis, and basic critiques have been published over time commenting on different aspects of Pablo's work. People have discussed whether he's mentally stable and whether his personal views and actions should affect how people view him as an artist. Without question, Pablo Picasso's works brought forth a controversy that will be debated for future generations to come.